All right, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us at another virtual roundtable session. My name is Amber Stoltz. I am outgoing Program and Development Chair for the Black Professionals Network and incoming Chair-elect for the Black Professionals Network. Today we have a special session on mentorship and professional development. We will be recording this session because it's such an important topic. So just keep that in mind as you're answering questions or providing your context and stuff, we will be recorded. Our speaker today is Dr. Kendall Pete, who is the Director of Housing Residence Life at Radford University in Virginia and the ACPA Chair member at large elect for the mid-level. I'll go ahead and let you get started, and thank you for joining us today.
Cool. Well, hey everyone, my name is Kendall and I use he, him pronouns. And as Amber said, I currently serve as the Director of Housing and Residence Life at Radford University. And I'm also the member at large mid-level elect for ACPA. So I'm really excited to be with you all today. And I think in a way of kind of getting started, I'll go ahead on and get the presentation going. Wait, let's see if we got it right. Are we able to see? We're all good? Okay. So I guess a couple of things that I'd agreed to kind of talk about as focus points for the presentation today was kind of types of mentorship, professional development and networks, and then also transitioning to a mid-level role. And I felt it's probably best that I could address those things through talking about lessons that I've learned through my own career journey. I recognize that there are probably a billion ways that people can, kind of address these topics from like a research standpoint and all of those things. But sometimes I think your lived experiences are just as valid and probably give you the most insight when you kind of pair it up with some of the other things that you're learning and navigating through. And so, like I said, I'll keep those as focus points, and then we'll kind of get this thing done. The other piece that I would share before I kind of jump in, I hope that this can be kind of conversational. I do have some slides and some things to share, but please use the chat to kind of let me know that you have some questions. I would ask for a little bit of help from Amber if you can, just to let me know that some questions might be there. We'll have some time for like Q&A towards the end, but I want to make sure that at least that you know that this is a conversation, and I hope to just share, what I've learned so far. So I guess in a way of getting started, it felt like it was probably maybe more easy for me to talk about my journey by sharing a little bit about my journey with you. So like I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois, and that is where the majority of my family are. So if there are any, Chicagoans or Midwestern folks, in this session today, my people, good to see you. But we moved from Chicago to Bristol, Virginia, which is a rural, smaller mid-sized city in Southwest Virginia, actually not too far from where I live now. But I did moved there right before high school. So you can imagine coming from big city to small town. But Bristol is most known for country music and NASCAR racing. And for what it's worth, not as a diverse place coming from Chicago. So that transition was pretty big for me. When I went away to college, I went to Hampton University, a private, small liberal arts, historically Black college and university in Hampton, Virginia, where I got my bachelor's in psychology. And I was there for 4 years, graduated in 2006. And then I went to Norfolk State University, which is a mid-sized urban public institution, also an HBCU. And that's where I received my Master of Arts. I have a dual master's degree in community and clinical psychology. But that is also where I kind of fell into housing and residence life. I took a grad assistantship where I was live-in hall director and kind of moved up in the ranks there. So whenever I tell people about my, how I got into housing story or how I got into student affairs, Norfolk State was the place where it happened for me. And I was at Norfolk State until about 2015 and relocated again to Virginia Tech. I took a job, come on, there we go. I took a job at Virginia Tech serving as an assistant director for residence life, where I managed a decentralized housing office and about a third of our campus community, which averaged at any point in time through the year, anywhere from like 3,000 to about 5,000 students in my area. That's also where I got my PhD. I started studying higher education administration in our higher education program at Virginia Tech, and then decided to quit my job in, I want to say, yeah, 2020, right at the start of the pandemic. I left my position and went full time to be a doc student. My hope was to complete the degree and kind of re-enter the workforce. In the interim of all of that, I took a interim job as the director of the Center for Diversity and Inclusion at Radford, and was only there for about 6 months. Kind of helped them out in the meantime where they had some staffing challenges. We had a director who had recently accepted a really awesome experience. And then they promoted the assistant director, and she also vacated the role for another great opportunity. And so they knew I was kind of off the market and available, but it was a great opportunity to get my first director job. And then when I went back and finished my degree, I came back. I was welcomed back to be our director of housing and residence life. So I've been here at Radford for about 6 months. But as you can see, like I've only worked in Virginia, but I've worked at a lot of different schools. And I also have kind of lived in a lot of different places. When you think about being in the major city of Chicago, rural Southwest Virginia, urban, military location in Hampton Roads, coming back to rural Southwest Virginia. I've also had those kinds of transitions, and I hope to kind of pull lessons that I've learned from, my moves and relocation, but also the roles that I've had. And so hopefully it'll make sense. And so here's some of our lessons. So lesson one, I know at the risk of being like cliche, the journey is yours. Like it is one thing to, have ambition. And I think that is really, really cool, and to have goals. And I think that is important. But what I've learned throughout my journey itself was that everything that I had planned has not gone to plan at all. And there are a lot of my, colleagues and friends who excelled, and you all may even have experienced this in some kind of way where even students, like I have students that have went on and, are doing really like ridiculous things, finished their doctoral degrees before I did, making a heck of a lot more money than I was, like all of those kinds of things. And I think sometimes you feel the pressure of needing to be somewhere at this certain point in time. But truly, like your growth pace and the speed at which your career, kind of moves, it's really yours. And it also doesn't have to look the same. Like I think I've learned that everybody's trajectory, as you can see, I've kind of moved up and around and all over the place and at different types of institutions. Taking those opportunities and going to those different places have, I think, added a lot of color and some vibrancy to my career path. And so I wanted to really share that, when you think about what it means to kind of transition to a mid-level role, or what it means to, just kind of move up in your career, it really is unique to you. I think it's a mixture of, strategic decisions that we make and opportunities that are presented and what you take advantage of. But then some of it is really serendipity, or, if you're a believer as I am, for me, I was like, man, some of this is divine. Like this happened purposefully. And so I do want to make sure that, folks kind of, I guess, take the step back and feel like, you don't have to move so fast, or if you are not, the most ideal candidate per se, in terms of like, I don't have a master's in higher education, or, I'm non-traditional in that way. I was every bit of that. Like I had no higher education background until I got, to Virginia Tech in terms of formal discipline. My work experiences were the things that, I was able to kind of pull together. And I still use those skills to this day. Like I always tell people that I incorporate my clinical background in the work that I do. And you all know better than most, when we deal with crisis and, other types of things such as like roommate conflicts and other types of, challenges, definitely those skills kind of come and show out naturally. And so being in the line of the dean of students, I've seen this kind of play out a whole lot more than I ever have in my career, and I value it very differently than maybe what I did when I first came to an institution where everybody had a higher education degree or formal training. So I said all that to say, your background and your pathway is yours, but that is the thing that truly makes you unique. So like lesson number two, kind of taking ownership of your path and recognizing that your career journey, is really unique to you. I think it's really important for you to own your development. One thing that I think also is very clear as you move into, more senior role or like moving to the mid-level. I think it was the shift where I thought when I came in that it was the university's responsibility or my job's responsibility to, grow me and make me this awesome professional. But what I really learned is that there's some shared value there. And I think it's important for, professionals to learn, especially either at the entry level and at the mid-level, that honestly, there's some shared responsibility. Yeah, there's some investment that your department and your organization will and should, and I hope that they are investing into your growth and development. But truly, in a lot of ways, that should be driven by you. I learned that I needed to truly target opportunities and people that were going to help and advance my growth. And I'll share kind of pointedly one of the real reasons why I was even considering Virginia Tech as an institution to go to. I knew I wanted to pursue a doctoral degree. They had a higher education PhD program. There were some other programs that I was considering, but I was like, we kind of checked the boxes, and what I was looking for was very different. I had only worked at HBCUs at the time, so I wanted to get this, huge R1, experience. So yeah, I was taking ownership. Like I started to say, this is the direction that I want to go, and that kind of fell in line with the decisions that I was making. But when I got to Virginia Tech, I knew I wanted to pursue the PhD. I had a supportive director, but she couldn't apply to the program for me. She couldn't say I was ready, to start. I had to, do this thing of like, taking some initiative. If this was an area that I really wanted to grow and pursue, that I had to name that. And I also had to be very intentional about making that happen. And I recognize that that is not, happening in isolation or anything like that. But I was the initiator at like, I'm ready to go. What needs to happen in order for us to kind of get going? Because there was an institutional benefit to support my tuition. And so the tuition assistance was there. I had to grab it. And so I always tell professionals at this point, really start to think about the opportunities that are available to you, and really go after it. Work with your supervisors and or people at your institution to really gather the experiences that you want. So if it is conference attendance, or if there are things, professional development things, or certifications that your institution offers, or there are other, things online that you want to do that might be, enhancing to your skill set or anything like that, go for it. Virginia Tech too offered the ability to become a strengths coach. So I started taking the strengths coach classes and things like that. Those are things that are opt-in. I say all that to say, this whole taking ownership piece is, where are you opting in and what opportunities are you saying yes to that are going to expand you and kind of move you forward? So I talked about taking advantage of opportunities, but you also have to target people. And I think this is a good place to, maybe talk a little bit about mentorship. And so we all know that like mentorship is about the influential relationships that you have that, kind of provide advice and or kind of push you forward. But one of the things that I kind of talked to Amber about was that the different types of mentorship relationships that you have and the ways in which they are able to help advance your career. And so we'll kind of go through the three: mentors, coaches, and sponsors. And so mentors tend to, provide insight related to industry or a particular profession. These people have some kind of expertise, and they're really there to kind of give you this how-to advice. I started to realize that like people that I sought out to mentor me in the field of housing and or student affairs, these are folks that at some way had some kind of like, length of time and or some expertise in the area that I was pursuing. And so they were able to kind of show me the how-tos or the ropes of navigating organizational culture, or how might I approach asking for this opportunity because it costs some money, or it might be, this feels a little political, and I don't know that I have that kind of clout. Um, I don't know what to do in this situation. I was able to ask a lot of questions to my mentors, to help me kind of navigate. But I recognize too, because these are industry professionals and or have some expertise in the field or broadly student affairs, a lot of our conversations were around like next steps. I made it very, clear that I was wanting to pursue a new opportunity when I was at Norfolk State. And my mentor at the time, uh, Mr. Ed Willis, who was the vice president of student affairs when I was there, he really sat me down and helped me navigate my path. And one of the things that he told me, because I was an associate director for residence life and academic initiatives at the time, and the position that I was considering at Virginia Tech was a lesser title, but he, really kind of shared with me the pros and cons of making a decision to take a title demotion, and it also, by the way, had a salary cut as well, but he knew I was wanting to pursue a PhD. So he said, if you think about the ways in which this might advance your career in long term, you've managed on less before. This is a strategic, decision that could potentially advance you. And I don't regret. It was hard at first, but it really, was one of the things that I didn't regret when I look back, on making that decision then. And so I say all that to say, like, mentors tend to have some kind of, again, expertise or content expertise, but they really are there to help with the how-tos and help you kind of look long-term at where you're trying to go. And something else that I, have been thinking about in the ways that like expertise, like I don't want folks to forget that you have peers that could also serve as mentors. Peer mentorship in a lot of ways is, very powerful. One of the things that fundamentally I think kind of vexes me about, student affairs, and sometimes I see it a whole lot in residence life cohorts for like RDs and things like that. It can become very, very competitive, in my opinion, for no reason. Like we all can shine, we all can achieve. I still don't understand why we get so competitive. But I think there are things that our peers know how to do, or have experience in, and they can really help us advance and grow if we are able to be, maybe humble or just even open to, hearing from our peers. That can also be an opportunity for growth and advancement. I think about this often with my colleague who was in my higher education, my PhD program. He was much more into, academic affairs side. He had done research. I was going part-time, but I had more professional expertise. So we oftentimes exchanged and mentored one another. He, me as a scholar, and I, we oftentimes shared about navigating, professional things as an administrator. And so I said all that to say those peer relationships can also be just as meaningful and powerful as mentorship relationships. So kind of moving on to coaching. Coaches, what I've learned, coaches have probably less to do with the professional piece and more about the life aspect of your career journey. Like they listen and provide guidance, and it may or may not have anything to do with your industry or your chosen profession. Those people often are helping you kind of clarify what it is that's going on in your life and where you are. But then also they provide some encouragement on how you can continue to move forward. And I love this third bullet about, helping people make meaning of the issues and challenges and opportunities that are at play. And so I reflect sometimes on, when I was thinking about making my transition to leave my job full time after already having taken a pay cut to go to school full time. I talked with one of my coaches, and really, really hashed out the opportunity and what it would mean for me to do this and that. And one of his advice, or kind of the feedback or guidance that he gave me, made a whole lot more sense. He was like, Kendall, what would it feel like to only focus on one thing? Like I had always worked and been in school. I was working full time, supervising a large team in a decentralized office. His question was, man, what would it feel like to just focus on school? and taking advantage of this opportunity, how could that help your mental health? How could that help you getting rest? Because I also was serving on call. He was like, man, like it's only a year and a half because I had already finished coursework. By then, my timeline was pretty done. It's like, man, do it. I was afraid of, missing out on the finances, not knowing, how was I going to be able to balance financially, not having the same income anymore. But I thought about, I had been burning on both ends, and taking advantage of this opportunity had larger benefits than just my job. He saw who I was as a person and what I was dealing with at that time and the where I wanted to go. And so I think sometimes your coaches are there to help make sense of where you are when you're confused, the issues and challenges that you're facing. Sometimes it might be in context of a professional decision, but I've learned that I think my coaches have been, kind of cheerleading me and bringing me back to the center of what's important personally or to my humanity. And so I think about that in terms of that's something that I really appreciated. And then oftentimes they provide informal feedback. I don't have to set up a meeting. It's a text like, can we talk? Like, I got this thing going on, or, can we connect in some kind of way? Let's go walk, let's do lunch. Something like that has been always helpful to me. And so lastly, kind of shifting to sponsorship, these are folks who, are influencers. These are the people with access. This could be, executives, AVPs, vice presidents in an industry or profession. These also could be other folks that are outside of the profession that may be connected to what it is that you are doing. And they may not be in proximity very close to the work that you're doing, but they have a perception or insight. Like you see in mentorship and coaches, like they're doing a lot of listening because they're right there with you. These people might be a little bit further removed, but maybe someone is speaking to them about the good work that you're doing. Those are folks that see from afar what it is that you're producing or have some other kind of, some other kind of insight to what it is that's going on with the work that you're doing. And so what they end up doing is leveraging their influence and access not only to endorse you, but to grant you access to places. I oftentimes think about this in my work with ACPA. I had a colleague who, had known for a while, but she was very active in the association and knew that I was, kind of branching out and doing more things in professional associations and the work that I was doing. Had noticed some of the skills. Other people had kind of maybe talked to her about some of the things that I was doing. And she was a convention chair member and flat out was like, all right, do you want to join convention team? And I said, like, me? She's like, well, yeah, like you can do this, 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 and this. And that invitation, I kid you all not, that invitation has meant the world to me because it gave me access to a sphere of opportunities in the professional organization in a way that I hadn't. I got super involved and became a conference team member working with our identity-based caucus sessions. And I did that for 2 years. I then got involved with MMI, which is our mid-level institute. And then from there, this member at large thing kind of came about. And so I said all that to say, sometimes you need folks that are going to be calling your name in places where you don't frequent. But then also, you got to say yes when they give you the knock to say, are you ready to come? Or I've often heard other folks talk about people who sponsor them that bring them to the meeting and say, sit here. I know you don't have any, kind of stake in this conversation, but I want you to hear what the language is so you're ready when you get there. And I often think that it is important for us to, kind of just be on the outlook and be able to discern when those moments are happening. Because sometimes those things are happening informally, and sometimes those things are happening around you and you're not even aware. So when the ask comes or when the invitation comes, that whole notion of staying ready so you don't have to get ready kind of thing comes to play because it can be pretty swift. So before I kind of move to the next lesson, one of the things that I want to say before I kind of pause a little bit for asking some questions and some, thinking around it, is how to find and identify mentors, I would also think about like people in terms of networks, because we're talking about industry. It may be housing and residence life. It may be broader things that you're doing that you might want to kind of get in this industry. Um, I would start thinking about who are the people that you're connected to that are in those places, and knowing that those people are also connected in industry in some kind of way. Um, who are the folks that have expertise and or things that you admire, or folks that you hear a lot about? Because these are, when I think about sponsored, these are, influencing people who you know who they are, but they may not necessarily know you with some depth. And so I kind of think about this whole networking analysis to know that that 6 degrees of separation is very real. But there are people at your institutions and or places that could truly help you. And then I think the other thing I'll add, and then we'll take a quick pause, is that those mentors may not always look like you or be in the people that you expected them to be. I think about this in my last role, that I hoped, for this relationship, that my supervisor, he was a Black man. And just for the record, he and I are very cool and we still keep in touch today. But I was thinking, oh man, he's going to be all of these things to me. And that just generally was not the way that he developed. He was highly supportive, backed me in everything that I did, but that individual mentoring and or coaching, that just wasn't going to be our relationship. He tended to be more of a sponsor. He used to put my name out and do different things like that. And it was, again, me taking ownership of identifying people that I could connect with that would coach me and or mentor me. So with that being said, I'll go down and take a quick pause to see if there are any questions. I'm going to check the chat, or any reactions to some of the things, that I've shared so far. Maybe there are some things that you all have experienced that kind of relate to this mentor, coaching, sponsorship kind of thing.
Okay, I currently don't see anything in the chat. I don't see any hands raised, but I'll pause to give people a second to do so.
Cool.
All right, with that, we'll keep going. But if you do have questions or things come up, use the chat or raise your hand.
All right, sounds good. All right, so next lesson. One thing that has been surprising to me is that I've really learned that search processes are definitely networking opportunities. We've been talking about developing your professional network, and that's truly connected to, that mentorship, coach, or sponsor relationship, and the participation in activities that you're part of. The more that you get involved at your institution or in a professional association, that broadens the network. But one thing that I didn't necessarily, I guess, notice at first was that search processes became networking opportunities for me. And I've gotten some mentorship relationships out of that. I actually think about the role that I'm in now. I actually interviewed for this job probably 3-4 years ago, and got beat out by another candidate, and it's perfectly fine. And I was asking for the feedback. I had a great experience here at Radford, and I asked the assistant vice president at the time, was there an opportunity to get some feedback? And to my surprise, she had a couple pages of things that she handwritten notes, things like that, and really good stuff, really good stuff. She said, the previous candidate or the other candidate that we went with had significantly more professional involvement in national associations, and that was just something that you didn't have. It might, kind of broaden your scope of how you look at the role of the field. There were some other things that they pointed out as some experiences that I didn't have, in contrast to the other candidate. But what she said to me, she was like, are you open for us to, continuing having a conversation and or connecting with the hired person? And, most people would not be at all interested in, you get beat out for a role, and that's searches, right? When we talk about this transition to mid-level, there are less of those roles and they become highly competitive. So I understood, if they went with another candidate, that person must be great, right? And I'm open to making that connection. And surprisingly, he and I are still highly connected as well. Had a great relationship that has come out of working with him. But I said all that to say, they thought about me again when this position became available. And part of it was, me staying connected, led to that opportunity to take that interim position while I was finishing up my doctoral work, which also led to an additional outreach around, reapplying for the position when this one came to play. And so I think, one of the points of feedback that my now supervisor has said was that, Kendall, a lot of your response to a no, and your willingness to remain connected in a genuine and authentic way, that was one of the things that truly brought you back to mind. It kept you in mind. And so it brought me back to another instance at Virginia Tech where the director at the time, would always kind of needle into our group's thought was that, we consider search processes an opportunity to maintain and build relationships. And you never know, as you all may have learned by now, how small student affairs is, and it gets even smaller in housing. And a lot of those relationships, surprisingly for me, have come through actually applying for jobs. And those folks know their other folks, and those folks, consider people for different opportunities, and or you start to meet folks in these other spaces. They're like, oh, so-and-so at XYZ institution. And that network continues to, expand. And so I said a lot to say, I think, that is one place that I have not thought, and I think that maybe we don't truly push people to consider as a networking space, is the search process. I think we get really focused on kind of securing the bag and the job, that we forget that these are relationships that could expand beyond this kind of moment in time. And so kind of the last but not least lesson that I learned is that you got to center self-awareness in everything. And what I mean by centering self-awareness has a lot to do with really reflecting on who you are, all the identities that you hold, where you are in life, what is important and what matters to you, your value system, and how that truly is important to your functioning, like as a human being. I recognize that, we are in this, kind of race of, professionalism and or, seeking different employments. And when I think about transitioning to a mid-level role, and particularly this one, I had been applying some of everywhere, like all over the place. But life happens. And at this point in my career, I started to really center what was important to me. And I had to place that at the heart of every decision that I was making. Something that kind of happened in life that kind of really brought this home for me. My mom was in an accident about a year ago, and suffered a pretty severe traumatic brain injury, and she is in recovery. At that point, I was interviewing in a lot of different places, and granted, I'm living in Southwest Virginia, but I would love to get back to a larger place, right? But while I was interviewing in Baltimore, actually at another institution, was wrapping up the conversation for the day, and the hiring manager asked me, Kendall, what is sitting with you right now? Like, what is really with you? And I said, I've had a really cool day, but the thing that keeps coming to mind right now is that I don't know if I can live this far away from my family. Like, love the people that I would work with, the office that I would have been leading, or the interactions that I had. But above else, what mattered at that moment, in that point in time, was being able to get to my mother if I needed to, or to support my father and my sister, and my siblings as they cared for our mother. And so at that moment, I think I walked away knowing that even if I had, gotten the offer or whatever happened, next, like I knew I couldn't do it. And that was at the heart of the decisions that I was making. And so I put this in context in terms of reflecting. I don't know that we ever stop to reflect on what's important to us. From a salary standpoint, I was thinking about what kind of money did I want to make? What kind of lifestyle did I want to have? what kind of environment that I want to be in? And I'm getting ahead into some of these questions, but I think about like truly, when do you ever sit and think about these kinds of things and weigh those as you're looking for your next position? In your early career, grad students and entry level employees, you know, the goal is let's get the bag, let's get the next thing, let's get the next thing, and you forget often what's important to you. I had to ask myself what was important right now. It was being near my family. But then sometimes you might need to think what is realistic for me or important long term. What is it? Do I want to become a vice president? Then that gives you some kind of strategic moves that you might want to make, that having such a narrow path in one particular functional area may or may not be the best idea, because AVPs and or vice presidents, they have oversight of multiple units. So how can you gather the skills and the things that you need, or the types of experiences to build your portfolio in a way that's going to make you a competitive candidate? Think about what you bring to the table. Sometimes I tell folks that you can have all the ambition in the world, but if you are really not ready and have the skill set for that position, you might really want to consider, is this something that I should be doing? Save yourself the hassle of, because we all know how long it takes to prepare for interviews, the emotional drain that it takes on us. Sometimes being honest about whether or not you are ready, or this is the kind of role that I should be in. One of my mentors used to always say, Kendall, we need right people in right roles with the right skill set to do the thing. And I started to kind of use that triangulation to ask myself, all right, is this the right institution? Is this the right role? And do my skill set, does my skill set, match what it is that is happening here in a way that's going to make me successful in the role and not cause me harm? Because at that point, I really, as even a person of color, like wants to make sure, and a Black person specifically, truly not think about me and my productivity, but me as a human being. Can I be happy there? I had a coach friend that I put, kind of in this coaching space, asked me a very hard question. She was like, Kendall, what do you need to be well? I had never in my life to ask myself that question. Um, I had took my job at Virginia Tech because it was the role, the opportunity, and I was going to be able to pursue the PhD. I didn't think about what I needed to be okay, because everything was there before. And I had gotten into a place where I didn't know anyone. I wasn't in the city anymore. I didn't know I was, that water meant that much to me. Being, near the ocean in Hampton Roads was as important until I came back inland and there's no salt water. Like legitimately, even the smell of the air changes when you're inland. And so I started to think about, okay, well, can I get these things? And if they are not actually present, am I able to build those things? And then you do the self-negotiating, right? Like, what are the things that I can, kind of manage and be okay with, and what are some of the things that I can't? And so I think about even the work that I have with my direct reports, or even our entry level staff, challenging them, start thinking about those things now, because you don't want to get into a place where you're in a job search or you're making transitions and your non-negotiables or your value points or things that are truly important to you don't have an answer to those questions. You don't want to be like me and learn, a couple months in, that the stuff you really need is not present, and you got to figure out how to regroup. Because there were plenty of times that I felt when I first moved to Virginia Tech and came to Blacksburg, that I wasn't going to make it because those things weren't there. Had my coach not really, challenged me to think about, what was really sustaining me in that way, I don't know that I would have thought intentionally about putting those things in place so that I can stay okay. But I guess with that being said, those are all the major lessons. I hope that it's been helpful to you, but I think it might be cool at this point to take some questions and or some responses.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing transparency and your journey with us all today. So snaps and everything. So yeah, just again, opening the floor up for questions, looking for hands. I see some claps. I see some round of applause, so that's awesome. And if people are more comfortable without the recording, we can go ahead and stop the recording to give people an opportunity to ask in an open space. So we'll go ahead and end that now for those watching later. Thank you.